Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Monday, April 20th, following a sixth straight Toronto Blue Jays series loss. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. Jori, not all is lost, however, as the Blue Jays are coming off an exciting, record-setting, if you will, blowout of the Arizona Diamondbacks. How are you doing, and how are you feeling about this Blue Jays team after the weekend?
It has been a very eventful, call it 24 to 48 hours, shall I say, for the Blue Jays and otherwise, and we'll get into all of that in short order, I'm sure. But a big win for the Blue Jays, no doubt about that. The bats finally come alive. Here are the 2025 Blue Jays in 2026 after all the struggles that we saw from these Blue Jays. We saw a couple of key knocks, a couple of big hits from Kazuma Okamoto, who, as I said, we will get into that nugget in short order. But the Blue Jays as a whole, Nathan Lucas comes alive. The Blue Jays, the bats awaken, and all of a sudden you feel a little bit better despite the series loss, that maybe things are trending in the right direction.
Yeah, so let's start with the win because I want to come out of the gates a little bit more positively. I'm sure we have some other topics to get into, but I mean, they come out of the gates against Ryan Nelson, 8 runs, tie a franchise record for most runs in franchise history in the first inning. They string together 7 straight hits to open the game before recording an out. Kaz Okamoto, bases loaded double, their first extra base hit with the bases loaded on the year. And then a couple batters later, Nathan Lucas does the same, clears the bases. Nathan Lucas, obviously, as we learned ahead of Friday's game, who had been battling vertigo to begin the season, which is certainly not something that you want to be battling as a major league hitter.
As a leadoff hitter, never mind major league hitter.
And he, sees this specialist in Phoenix on Friday, I believe they said, and then rips off 7 hits in the 3 games, including 2 3-hit performances, just to, kind of show you, hey, this guy's still in there. After I think it was on our last episode last week, you were talking, or I'll say we were talking about, Nathan Lucas as a potential demotion candidate when some of these injury guys get back, but seems like now that his vertigo has been cured by this doctor who get him on the payroll, like let him travel with the team, I guess. Kind of fixes his issues, and Lucas looks more like the guy that we saw in 2025 than the one that we saw through the first couple weeks here in 2026.
Incredibly encouraging development just to have him, be a contributor, because the bats as a whole were silent, to put it lightly. And Nathan Lucas coming up with a couple big knocks. With the bases loaded, the Blue Jays yesterday had more hits with the bases loaded than they did through their first 20 games. I believe it was 1 for 20
They were 1 for 20.
before, and then 2 for 3 yesterday. So, I mean, you want to talk about the difference. The difference was cashing in when the opportunities presented themselves. And Nathan Lucas, obviously a big part of that. Kazuma Okamoto, a big part of that. 2 guys that have been in deep, have been going through it to start the season, and crucial for those 2 guys to show signs of life.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously good for them to kind of get the monkey off the back and find their way into a couple of big hits, especially, I mean, you're staring down a series sweep, but being able to come out there, I'm sure just a huge sigh of relief for them once they put up the 8 runs. I think you end the run, or you end the game with 10 runs, so maybe you'd like to see a little more consistent offense the rest of the way, but certainly won't complain about a double digit run game and an 8-run inning, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, to throw way back, I remember playing NBA 2K11 years and years and years ago, and the term they would use for that kind of stuff was like spurtability. So it all came in spurts for these Blue Jays, I guess.
I don't love the word spurtability. Um, so I just wanted to throw it back. So obviously, they tie the record for runs in a first inning with 8. And so I was looking it up, the previous 2 games where they scored 8 runs in the first inning. The first time in franchise history was September 26, 2007. That came in an 8-5 win over the Baltimore Orioles. So they score 8 in the first and do not score the rest of the way. That was a Roy Halladay game. I'm just going to read you the lineups from these 2 games where they did it. So first one, 2007. Reed Johnson, Matt Stairs, Alex Rios, Frank Thomas, Aaron Hill, Greg Zahn, Adam Lind, Russ Adams, who was replaced by Hector Luna, and John McDonald.
What a group of dudes there. Russ Adams, the
So
future shortstop for the Blue Jays. Oh my God.
let me tell you this. So they scored the 8 runs in the first inning, not a single extra base hit, all singles.
I'm noticing a pattern here.
So the second one was against the Yankees on July 14th, 2011, where they blitz Bartolo Colon to start the game. And so the Blue Jays lineup on that date was Yunel Escobar, Eric Thames, who was eventually replaced by Corey Patterson, Jose Bautista playing third base, who was eventually replaced by John McDonald, Adam Lind, Aaron Hill, Edwin Encarnacion, Travis Schneider, JP Arencibia, and Rajai Davis.
What a list of dudes
They
between
had they
these two
had
guys.
multiple extra base hits in that game, but no homers.
Okay, so of the group that you've mentioned, these groups of oh my God, I remember that guy. Can you want to pick out a name from the lineup the other day that you think will end up in that category? Because I have one that immediately comes to mind.
Well, Brandon Valenzuela being the first one to strike out, I think is like fairly notable. But I mean, Nathan Lucas hitting leadoff kind of fits into that, right? Like as a 7 year minor leaguer for him to come up and like kind of be the driving force in that inning.
Like him, Miles Straw, the other one too, and he had
Yeah.
a big knock too. The Jays are hurting, man. There's a lot of guys in this lineup that would
So
not typically be there.
it's funny because, we both I said Lucas Valenzuela, you said Straw, but the obvious one is Eloy Jimenez.
Oh,
Like
that's the
being right in the
obvious one
middle of
right
it.
there.
Like it's kind of funny. What have you kind of made of him so far? He's kind of been in and out of the lineup. Like I think the at-bats have looked fine. He's kind of continued the thing that he was doing in Buffalo where he's just like ripping singles.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't really read too much into that because he's a very obvious candidate that's not going to stick around very long. It seems like it would have been nice if he came out of the gate swinging, but my thoughts on him are briefly synopsized as seems like exactly what you're going to get from a guy getting called up from AAA because he wasn't able to crack the big league roster out of camp.
Yeah, he's 5 for 16 with 5 singles and 2 walks. So
I
I mean,
mean,
there's
you take that,
it's a 110
but
WRC plus.
it's
So
it's passable. I mean, it's playable. It's not what you're hoping to get out of the guys that are gonna be taking his job when Barger and Springer and so forth get a little more healthy.
yeah. Will be good for them because, again, they lose Dalton Varsho in game one of the series. He exits with I believe it was knee discomfort, but it turns out it was like kind of a quad thing and sounds like he'll be back today. So, hopefully they kind of start to round their way into some better health because they are going to certainly need it. As now we sit here on April 20th and they are 8-13, so a lot of work to be done. And, it sounds like Springer and Barger are kind of progressing. Trey Savage and Jose Barrios are scheduled for more rehab starts this week, which, I think Savage kind of seems like he's going to be making his last one before he's back.
Yeah, no word on if any electrical substations have been built near the Dunedin complex, but the health certainly, again, remains a topic of conversation around these Blue Jays because it's been the only topic. Once they get healthy, you'll get a better idea of who these Blue Jays are. I mean, that big inning kind of gives you a little bit of life, but again, another series loss is tough, but you just got to kind of keep yourself in there because it does sound like reinforcements are on the way. It sounds like your Savage is knocking on the door pretty much.
So I wonder kind of like, we talked about it last week, before the Brewer series, the last time we recorded, kind of about the concern level and, you know, I just find it hard to evaluate this team when they're not at full strength, right? Like it feels like when they're whole, they will obviously be much better, right? And, it's been good for them that the rest of the American League hasn't, gotten off to this amazing start, right? I mean, I know standings watch isn't really all that useful in April, but, it's not like anybody has, 15, 16, 17 wins. The most wins is the Yankees with 13. The Guardians have 13. The entire AL West is at 500 or worse. So I wonder, like, concern level for you on like where this team is at today with, the reinforcements like kind of seeming like they're on the cusp of making their way back? Like what is kind of the concern level for you
I
as far
mean,
as like this team at least being able to, push their way back into the conversation?
listen, you and I have very different kind of responses to this start. I think I've been a little bit more on the early reactionary side, but it does ease your fears a little bit that the bats finally came alive because, as much as baseball isn't really a momentum thing, you're only as good as tomorrow's starting pitcher. But it does feel like having a big inning like that is a bit of a breakthrough for these Blue Jays. Now, I don't know exactly if it's a change in process. It seemed like they were kind of attacking a little bit more early in counts, which seems like something they had explained that they wanted to do. And it seems like the early returns have been good. I mean, hard to say. You beat up on what Ryan Nelson is not exactly a top of the rotation guy. It's hard to read too much in a really one inning because it really was one inning, but it is encouraging that the bats did finally wake up. And the hope is that they're able to parlay that into some, success against the Halos here. I mean, Reed Detmers, they get to tonight on Monday. Not an easy task by any means, right? So it's kind of going to be right back to the grind, so to speak. And I guess my thought, my concern, my whatever you want to call it, my vibometer, whatever, it's not at the level it maybe was after game 2, but you know, I think I require a little bit more kind of what's the word I'm looking for? A little more proof that that inning was the truth.
Yeah. I mean, the general concern level is, well, they got to turn it around, right? Like you got to start playing better baseball. And, overall, I think the series was a little bit better from like a sloppiness standpoint. I know there was still some errors, but, I think they kind of seem to be like building towards, more of what they were last year rather than, I think in the Brewers series there was certainly some poor baseball played and obviously before that as well. So we'll kind of see. I think this is a pretty big series, this Angels one, where if they can return home, riding high a little bit, I think that'd be really big because, as we saw last year, right? Like they were terrific at home last year. Like they beat down anybody that walked into the Rogers Center in 2025, and they were kind of, around 500 on the road. And so far this year, obviously the A sweep helps their home record, but again, like on the road, I think they have like two maybe three road wins to start this year. So, um, we'll kind of see how that all plays out. Obviously, they have some tough pitching matchups, like you said, Reed Detmers, Jose Soriano is going to pitch for the Angels in this series, so definitely a level of urgency.
Competition. It's
I would
gonna
s- I
be
would I
it's
would
gonna
say
be tough.
urgency is needed, right? To kind of get themselves back in it and then be in a good position where once Springer and Barger and you're Savage and if Kirk down the line or back in the lineup that you're kind of ready to take off and be that contender that you were built to be rather than this team
Yeah.
that's gonna need that like ramp up period.
Yeah. What is your sense in that case then in terms of, it's always easy to say it's early and stuff, but it is. I mean, we're approaching the end of April here, and I believe it was last year you had mentioned to me that by even like Labor Day, by May 24, or even earlier than that, the playoffs don't tend to shuffle around that much, even into early May. Now, we're not quite there yet. There's still 10 odd days to go until that's even a discussion. But, how important is this series to you to have the Jays kind of get themselves back into a wild card picture early on? Because again, it's just early, but it is still remains true that if you come out of the gate slow, you can't win the division in April, but you can certainly lose it.
Yeah, I think the rest of the AL's performance, right? Like the Yankees aren't 15 and 6, right? Like there's room for the Blue Jays to, run a similar race to the one that they did last year, right? Like you kind of look last year when they go to Los Angeles for their series against the Angels on May 6th and they're 16 and 19, right? And now there's a fairly large difference between 16 and 19 and 8 and 13. They need to kind of, get themselves to that point. But I just think, you don't want to put yourself in a position to need to do this in back-to-back years where you're in early May under 500 and you need to play at like a 105 win pace to, kind of earn your way into the playoffs. But I just think with the injuries that they have, it's kind of the hand that they've been dealt, right? So there's kind of the necessity for them to, once they're whole, they're going to have to play at this level that we saw last year. And, are they going to be able to do it? We'll kind of see how things play out. But I just it's just so early to like really assess this team and, write them off when we're on April 20th and they have, 10 guys on the IL.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, right? I don't think that anybody's writing off the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
I think there's just a sense of frustration, I think,
Yeah.
around as you said, the hand that they've been dealt and the way they haven't been able to respond because it's tough to respond when your arguably second and third best hitter are sitting on the bench.
I would say too, like you look around the league too, like the Royals, a team that both of us picked to win the AL Central, are 7-15. The Mariners are 10-13. The Astros are 8-15. The Phillies are 8-13. The Mets are 7-15. Like this isn't just a Blue Jays issue to start the year, but the Blue Jays are certainly, one of the teams that has been bogged down by the most injuries. So I think that, if you're the Mets, obviously, they're missing Juan Soto, which is fairly significant for them. But if you're the Blue Jays, I think that there's just going to be such an emphasis on once you're back at full strength or closer to it that you really need to get going.
Yeah, you're gonna have to give me a minute here to see if I can find the tweet, but there was something that made the rounds earlier today about man games lost and projected wins lost and so forth. And the Jays were right at the top of that list in terms of the value they'd lost and the man games they'd lost.
Yeah. It'll be important, man, for like once these guys are back, like you can't continue kind of, stringing along at 500, like you're gonna have to play at an above 500 pace.
This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
Let's move on. I mean, some more negatives from the series. Obviously, the Jeff Hoffman discussion. We've kind of, I wouldn't say danced around it, but the worst two Hoffman outings of the season have come since we last spoke. So I kind of wonder where you are. Obviously, the one in Houston or in Milwaukee, excuse me, where he comes in after they take the lead off Trevor McGill, blows the lead, they go on to win in extras. And then the one on Saturday in Arizona where he comes in the eighth inning with the game tied and then gives up single to eight, nine hitters, issues a 4-pitch walk to Ketel Marte, and then Corbin Carroll hits the grand slam, and then they make him kind of wear it for the rest of the inning. So I'm kind of wondering, obviously John Schneider comes out and defends him after the game. It's what he's going to do. I don't think that he's going to crap on Jeff Hoffman to the reporters immediately after a game like that. But I kind of wonder what your thoughts are on Hoffman and, is there a discussion to be had about him not being the closer?
I mean, I think that discussion has been ongoing, uh, at least externally. Internally, I don't get the sense that they have any plans to take him out of the closer role. But I mean, he came in the eighth inning, certainly would be telling. You know, it's difficult because all the underlying metrics, all the strikeouts, all the whiffs, the chase, that's all still looking like an elite closer in Major League Baseball. But just when guys make contact, he just gets tagged. He just gets annihilated. And it's becoming a pattern where it's hard to ignore it. This is a guy that needs to be able to keep the ball in the yard to be successful like any pitcher does.
Yeah.
But especially for him, because when guys make contact with Jeff Hoffman's splitter or fastball or whatever, it tends to get hit really goddamn hard. So, I mean, do you want that to be your closer? I mean, that's just kind of the life of a reliever. There's lots of kind of volatility to the position. But you look at a guy like Louis Varland, who has come out of the gates roaring hot for these Blue Jays, and it would seem easy to make him a guy that you want to put in the ninth inning. You know, to me, I like Varland as a fireman more than I like him as a ninth inning guy specifically.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel like Jeff Hoffman is a guy that you can use in a leverage spot, then you got to find someone that you feel like you can.
Yeah, it's such like a weird profile, Jeff Hoffman, right? Because you like you said, the strikeouts are there, all the process numbers look fairly good. But the problem with being a closer in the majors is that the process is sometimes a little bit less important than the result, right? Because as a closer, what people are going to care about is did you get the save? Did you close out the win? Now, does that, does yesterday's save guarantee tomorrow's save? Absolutely not. So I think, the thing that's concerning for me is that in these two outings against the Brewers and Arizona is he's lost the zone completely, right? Like the stuff has not been competitive, really. In his first 8 outings of the year, he only had 2 walks, and in these last two, he's had 4, right? And Arden Zwelling had a good tweet where in his last 2 outings, the slider zone rate 37.5%, the splitter zone rate 22.2%, the first pitch strike rate 35.7%. So he's not landing his secondary stuff in the zone, which is forcing him in the zone with his fastball, and he's not getting ahead on hitters, which is forcing him into the zone with his fastball. I thought it was pretty telling that 3-0 to Marte the other day that he went splitter, right? Like there's just not the competitive stuff in the zone right now, which has kind of led to these 2 outings. So, he's a guy that is basically on strike watch, right? Like throw the ball in the zone because again, your stuff is good. Like the stuff is good. The splitter has looked much better this year. I thought before the last couple outings, the velocity is holding earlier, like we saw in 2025 early in the season. Like throw it in the zone. I mean, I know that he's kind of gotten hammered when he's been in the zone, but I think that's kind of the dance that he's losing right now, right? Is where he falls behind and then he's got to be in the zone. Where if he's in the zone early, then you can kind of maneuver around and get guys to chase a little bit more.
Yeah, and it changes the whole complexion for him. Whereas if he's falling behind, he's getting smoked. So, I mean, throw strikes, bozo. I think that's what I like to say. And I think it's
Yeah.
kind of true in this situation, right? You know, I still have a lot of faith in him, a lot more than I think a lot of the other people that I speak to. Uh, but I recognize also, and I think everyone recognizes that this is a guy that needs to keep the ball in the yard to continue to be a guy you can trust in a high leverage spot. Because if he's going to be giving up home runs at this rate, then you can't use him in an eighth and ninth inning role.
Yeah, I kind of wonder like the conversation of, can you put the genie back in the bottle? If you give him a 2 week break or you kind of put him in some lower leverage spots to try and get some of that confidence back, right? Like can you take him out of the closer spot and then put him back there? Like is that something that would be he would be able to overcome like mentally, like losing the job and then gaining it back?
I would hope so. I can't speak for him. I'm not inside the Blue Jays clubhouse. But, to me, he should be the closer for these Blue Jays. But if he's not getting it done, then you can't make him the closer. It's really as simple as A, B, C.
You want to talk about like a needed reinforcement, like the Jimmy Garcia thing would be really nice to have back, right? Like he's throwing bullpens right now in Dunedin and is kind of, pacing to face live hitters here. So he's a guy that I think would be super nice back to kind of, fit into this conversation of can you, how do you kind of handle Jeff Hoffman? Because right now it kind of seems like it's Varland or nobody, right? Obviously Tyler Rogers, he's not the you trust him coming into a clean inning, right? But you don't if there's runners on or whatever, he's not necessarily the perfect option for that based on the fact that he's not going to get a lot of strikeouts and a lot of swing and miss, right? And beyond Varland, I think you look at a guy like Braden Fisher who's been really good. But there aren't exactly, a ton of guys that I would be kind of circling as closing options right now in this Blue Jays bullpen.
No, the circle of trust right now is shrinking in the wrong direction, not growing in the right one.
Yeah. All right, well, let's stay on the pitcher front on the controversial side, and of course Eric Lauer, who gets the start on Friday behind the opener Braden Fisher, and then immediately after the game comes out to reporters and says, "I hate following an opener." What were kind of
Does
your
Eric Lauer understand what he's doing? Like he know? Do you think he understands that he's uh, shall I say courting controversy? Do you think he's looking to stir the pot a little bit here? Like, what is the game plan here, Eric Lauer? You
he's just being
you're a
honest,
guy
man.
that's right now. I mean, he's being honest, but he's also got to recognize. I mean, Eric Lauer's no dummy. This guy is a former top prospect. Has played the game for a long time. Has played overseas. He's no dummy, right? This guy is not stupid. Why you're getting the bulk role for all intents and purposes? You were starting the ball game. Why are you kicking up a fuss here again?
I wish I could tell you. The quote was, is super interesting, right? He's like, to be real blunt, I hate it. I can't stand it. You work with what you got. We're trying to make things up, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And then, of course, he goes on to say, it messes with your pregame routine. We're creatures of habit, starters. It changes the rhythm and routine. It's a little harder to time things out. You can make it work the best you can. Hopefully, it's not something that we'll continue doing, but that's above my pay grade. Well, it
I just
really,
I
the end of that certainly,
I mean, it sounds like
it is
a
above
bit of a
your pay grade.
jab. It sounds like a jab at the front office. It sounds like an arbitration situation here, where
It's funny how
he
that's
was
kind of leaked over,
displeased.
hey? How
Yeah.
he's, loses his ARB case and then he enters spring training talking about how he thought he deserved to be a starter. And, now he comes out as, again, it still is starting. But I mean, if I was a pitcher, I'd be like, hell yeah, I don't want to face Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll, and Geraldo Perdomo to open a game. Like, give me the bottom of that lineup and let me roll through a couple times instead of having to
It,
see those guys more.
it makes no sense to me that he's so, I guess, like, this is helping you. This is making you, this is putting you in a more advantageous spot. Your numbers will presumably be better because you're facing better hitters less frequently. It just makes no sense to me that he's listen, the bullpen stuff is one thing. He wants to be a starter. He feels like a starter. He feels like he's at his best as a starter. And really, he is at his best for the Blue Jays when he is filling in as a starter. But for all intents and purposes, serving as a follower to an opener is basically just starting. But instead of having a guy come in the fifth inning, you have a guy start for you to ease the burden in terms of the high leverage dudes. Like, I just don't understand what Eric Lauer is trying to accomplish. Is he trying to push buttons here? Or is he trying to be like, hey, put me in the rotation and make me a starter? Because that's not going to happen. There's all kinds of guys ahead of you, and you are, unless the results change, unless the process changes, unless enough stuff changes, you're not going to be a part of this five-man rotation when everybody is healthy. So when you are starting and they're putting you in a spot where you're going to have success, it makes no sense to me whatsoever that he runs to the media and goes, I didn't like that spot. It just doesn't make any sense. You can not like it, that's fine. But there's no reason to run to the media about it.
What did you think of Schneider's response to it the day after?
Again, it's, for him, nobody's going to win this spot. Like, I think Schneider's answer was pretty political. I don't think he really said anything too notable. Like, it's to me, this is kind of just squarely on Lauer, and just a strange dynamic brewing here that makes no sense to me.
I liked the end of Schneider's quote where it's like, "Hey, I pitch," or sorry, "Hey, you pitch, I decide." And it's like, well, yeah, right. Like that's kind of how it should be. And it's just interesting, right? Where Lauer has kind of struggled this year. I know he's kind of dealt with the flu and kind of worked with bouncing back from that, which again lends you to think, hey, this guy's maybe not at 100%. Probably would be helpful if we take the burden of that top three of the Diamondbacks order off of him. So. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it really. I think it's just kind of one of those things that even Schneider said it, right? Like where or Keegan kind of said in his video after the game too, where like the expectation should be that Lauer talks to them instead of the media about following it. And again, we're not in the clubhouse, so we don't know kind of how things unfold, but and obviously it gives us something to talk about that he comes out and says it to the media first, but again, from a team vibe standpoint, you got to
It's
think
just
that
perplexing.
it's
It makes
just,
no
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
It's
Um,
nonsensical. I mean, listen, if I'm Eric Lauer and I'm pissed off, well within his rights to be pissed off. And you know what? Yeah, you were really good last year as a starter. I would also like the opportunity to start. But in this one instance, you're basically starting regardless. So this made no sense to me whatsoever. It was just such a nothing burger mountain or a mole. What is it? Mountain out of a molehill.
yeah.
A self-inflicted wound.
It's funny too because like Lauer, I was the thing with him is like he's like he has like this deep pitch mix, but he uses his fastball really often. This Diamondbacks lineup really struggles against spin, and Braden Fisher throws a lot of sliders, a lot of curveballs, and like it just made a lot of sense to me to use Fisher as an opener, but
That's why
that's
Eric Lauer's not the manager. It's
it is
really
it
that
is
simple.
it is certainly above my pay grade. So
That's
let's move on. If you want to talk about people getting upset over the weekend, I suppose we can transition here to where Jory had some people upset over the weekend by a tweet that he sent out about Kaz Okamoto. Um, I don't
well.
know if
Let's
you
let's
want to
let's
talk
for
about
the
it,
well.
but
Let's because So about a week ago or so, on I believe it was the 14th, I tweeted something out basically saying that Kazuma Okamoto did not look like a player, and he'd have to basically change what he was doing for me to think he looked like a player. The offense did not look great in terms of the process. Was not hitting the ball particularly hard. Was swinging and missing, which is something we have discussed on this podcast at length. Was swinging and missing a ton. Did not look like a dude that was going to be worth a 4 year, $60 million deal. And then, of course, it made the rounds a little bit on Twitter, thanks to, I mean, the fellows over at Gate 14. And it was a bit of a back and forth. Okamoto has a double, and Junta hits the retweet button, and I went back at him. I said, "Me when I take a victory lap when a guy hits 40% of his extra base hits in one game when he comes in with a 550 OPS or whatever it was." And then he goes, "It's a small sample size." And I went back and forth with another individual, kind of pointing to some numbers where even early on when guys come over from overseas, you can tell pretty quickly based on their production whether they are going to be someone that is going to be a contributor. And let me be clear here because, 280 characters not enough to give this nuance. But the expectation for Kazuma Okamoto coming into this year was that he was going to be a middle of the order contributor. I want that to be very clear here. This is a guy that they gave that contract to because the expectation was that he would come in and be like a 2, 3, 4 win player for these Blue Jays with at least league average defense and a certain ability to avoid strikeouts, like how the Blue Jays had kind of, operated last year, and so on and so forth. And that has obviously not been the case. And he had a really good game against the Diamondbacks in game 3. I actually think, and we talked about this before we hit the record button. The big takeaway is that there were a number of pitches that were down and away that he didn't swing at, which is something that has repeatedly been an issue for him. So, you could read into him taking a middle fastball, 390 feet or whatever it may be, off the wall for a double, or you can read into, him getting to balls he's supposed to be getting to. To me, the takeaway here is that he's been a guy that has not looked the part, even by process. And this is something that I know you pointed out to me that they spoke about even on their show, that the process for him had been underwhelming, had not been great, right? So now I don't want to make this about me. I want to talk about Okamoto here now, because to me, it's signs of life for Okamoto, which is crucial because they have committed a lot of term and a lot of money to this guy to be a contributor. And you need him to show signs of life, which he did yesterday, which is crucial because if the Jays are going to be successful, they're going to turn this around, as we spoke about at length earlier, they are going to need contributions down the lineup.
Yeah, so I mean, my assessment of the situation from a bird's eye view, if you will, was that your tweet perhaps came across as you were like completely out on Okamoto and, not convinced that he could ever be a contributor, which, again, like you said, Twitter, very tough place to add all the appropriate context and all of the, the ways that we think
Nuance.
about the nuance and all the ways that we think about a situation, right? So to me, I think your tweet came across as that you were just completely out on him and there was like no chance that he would ever, be a productive player, which again is certainly not the case because this is a guy who, is adjusting to his MLB life. He's adjusting to Canada, adjusting to America, adjusting to the big league travel, adjusting to everything, right? So I think it's understandable for him to get off to a slow start. But saying that, if he continued to play at the way that he had for the last couple of weeks, where he swings and misses a ton, strikes out a bunch, which is not the player that we had seen him be in Japan, right? You kind of look at the strikeout rates that he ran in NPB and they were around 20%, lower than 20%, and now we're sitting here and it's a 34% strikeout rate. So, it certainly wasn't the player that we were expecting right away. And, I think the way that he looked in spring training and the way that he looked in on the opening weekend kind of changed, maybe some of the expectations early on for him, where there was always going to be an adjustment period. And how he, bounces back from that is going to be the most important thing going forward, right? Like how he's, like you said, how he spits on those pitches low and away, how he adjusts to the way that pitchers are hitting, or how the way that pitchers are pitching him low and away, sweepers, sliders, curveballs, dealing with that spin. And, yesterday's game hitting the fastball from Ryan Nelson, taking advantage of a mistake. Like that's a huge step forward, right? Where, if you're going to struggle with those pitches low and away, you better do damage when they're coming up and in on you or inside with the fastball. And, we saw him do that with that fastball. We saw him hit the slider out against Hoffman. So, I think the entire situation, it's developing, right? Where we're still learning so much about this player and who he's going to be.
I think my only kind of, I guess, reservation is the strikeout rate is still enormously high. I mean, it's over 30%. And I get this, adjustment period thing. But again, I mean, I pulled up the numbers here. I can pull them up again. But basically,
So,
the
so
crux
do
of the
do you like
crux of
do
that.
you do you expect him to improve that strikeout rate going forward? Because I would say, based on the sample size of his career in Japan, it shows that he
I
is
just,
a more of a true
you know
talent
what?
hitter than the 34%.
I agree with that. And I think it's hard to be a 34% strikeout guy and hang around. Yes, that is probably going to get better as things progress. But, at the same time, that kind of stuff normalizes really quickly. I don't think he'll be a 30% strikeout guy because nobody is a 30% strikeout guy. If you're a 30% strikeout guy, you're a AAA player. But I mean, this is a guy in MPB that was like a, 10 and 10 or, 12 and 12, whatever, 1-to-1 strikeout to walk thing. And that was never going to be the case in the big leagues. But I don't think he's a guy that you want to be approaching even like 30%. Like if he's into the 28, 27, 28, 29% strikeout rate, that remains concerning. And that would require a pretty significant step from where things are right now. So that's kind of where my concern lies is that a lot of the process for him has not been great. Listen, he has actually started hitting the ball harder. I mean, when I tweeted that out, he was below that kind of 90% Goldilocks zone. I think he was in like the 80, or excuse me, he was hitting it, 88, 89 maybe. And now he's, I think, up over that 90%, 90 miles an hour average exit velocity, which is important, but the barrel rate is still underwhelming, and the chase rate's underwhelming, and the whiff rate's underwhelming, and the walk rate is non-existent. It just this is a guy that is going to either need to tap into some power that I'm not sure is there, or is going to have to completely change the approach to the plate, which is what I said originally. He's going to have to completely change the narrative for him to be a guy that can be a contributor to the Blue Jays.
Yeah, we'll see. I think, I thought the swing looked a little bit better overall, just on the weekend. So we'll kind of see how it all plays out going forward. He's, obviously going to be like a key part of this Blue Jays lineup if they want to get where they want to go. They're going to need him to be this middle of the lineup producer, or even a lower in the lineup producer that is able to spring for extra bases, right? Like I believe I saw that he has had the most at bats with runners in scoring position on the Blue Jays this year, and of course, the results have not really been there outside of this weekend and the opening weekend against the A's. So we'll see. I think it's just really worth watching. How his process continues and kind of how his approach continues, right? Like obviously, you say the strikeout rate like stabilizes pretty quickly, but it wouldn't shock me a ton if we saw him from this point out, or pick whatever arbitrary start date that you want. Like if there was a point in the season where he's like a 22% strikeout rate guy for the rest of the year, right? Where he kind of
Yeah,
finally makes
which
that
is tenable,
adjustment,
which is
right?
huge,
Yeah.
but it's not what we've seen to this point, right? And it would take a pretty substantial change for that to be the case. I mean, even yesterday, two extra base hits, two strikeouts.
Only two chases though. He only swung out of the zone twice, so you know,
Progress,
progress.
progress.
We'll take it. Let's move on. Let's close out here. We're finally kind of into the heart of the minor league season, and the Blue Jays farm system has just been incredible so far. I think the excellent stories from top to bottom have really been there this year. We're kind of at the point with JoJo Parker already where we were with Trey Savage, where he's kind of demanding that we speak about him every week. He's riding this incredible hot streak. They called up Juan Sanchez, I guess if you want to call it a promotion, where he gets the bump to low A Dunedin after being kind of scheduled to start the year with the FCL team. But I mean, JoJo in his last 12 games, he has hits in 11 of them. He's slashing 326, 491, 605. It's good for a 206 WRC plus. He hits his first two career home runs. Like this is a legit prospect, and we kind of knew that entering the year from everything we've seen and just kind of the impressive, data. I think you'd love to see him hit the ball in the air a little bit more because the way he hits the ball so hard, his approach is so good, and he's swiping bags. He already has 6 stolen bases on the year. Like, how encouraged are you by this start from JoJo Parker?
Well, you pointed it out. The speed is something that I don't think we'd heard much about, and it has really emerged as an additional tool in the toolkit. This is a guy to me that is, I mean, looks really like a top 25 prospect in baseball, on the upswing. I mean, we'll see what's to come. He's riding a bit of a BABIP heater of late, but that's going to happen when a
When
guy's
you're
running a
smoking the ball.
it's exactly that, right? I think that you were saying he's averaging like a 96 mile an hour average exit velocity.
Yeah.
He's maxed out over that 111 Goldilocks kind of magic number. Uh, he's got some juice. He's got to hit the ball in the air, but if he does, I mean, this is a premium position guy potentially. At the very worst, a third baseman that is going to be a premium hitter in the big leagues potentially. Now, this is a lot of projecting, still a teenager, still lots of time for things to unfold in his career, but the early returns have been nothing short of spectacular for him.
Yeah, I mean, you want to look at like the 12% barrel rate, the 60.6% hard hit rate, the walk rate is up near 20%. The 90th percentile exit velocity is 12 or is 107.4 miles per hour. So like this is an insane start for a 19-year-old. Obviously, there are like a couple nits to pick if you want to talk about, he's running like a 60% ground ball rate, but as far as like hitting the ball hard, like couldn't have asked for a better start from him. And obviously, it's exciting there seeing Juan Sanchez get the call, seeing Blaine Bullard off to a great start. Dunedin has been kind of the place to be the last couple of years, with Trey, Cal engaged there last year, and now it's JoJo, Juan, and Blaine. Like has just kind of been this wave of really talented prospects kind of working their way through Dunedin. And I kind of wonder for you, like we were talking about it again before we hit record, but like what would kind of be your bar to promote him to Vancouver?
I mean, listen, we discussed this, and it's worth putting on the record that Vancouver is where where bats go to die a little bit. We've seen how Arjun Namala, who despite having a WRC plus, I think of almost 120, it's just maybe a shade below that. He's still fighting for his life. He's running like a 200 BABIP right now. Uh, Nat Bailey, for as beautiful a park as it is, for as iconic of a Canadian landmark it is in the Canadian baseball scene, uh, it is uh hell on earth to try to muster anything in terms of just big power or really kind of generate anything. It's you've got the Seattle adjacent kind of air and the park itself. The dimensions are not the most friendly at times. So, you know, ideally you kind of want to keep him out of there if possible. But I think if he forces your hand, I mean, I would be ready to go as early as even like June. If he continues to hit like this, then there's no sense in keeping him in Dunedin when you can ship him off to Vancouver and, see if he can hang there. I mean, he's 19 years old. He's so young and he's still just lashing the ball. And it would seem like if this is something that he's going to be, prove he's able to do, then there's no reason to believe that he isn't capable of doing this at the next level. And we'll see what happens there. And, just like kind of how they forced the issue with Trey Savage, who, mind you, was a lot older, if Parker can be a guy that can force the issue, you're going to find yourself with a top 10 prospect and perhaps even better.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because the move to Vancouver is like so process reliant, right? Like you have to be convicted that he can go to Vancouver and deal with some of the negative park factors for hitters, right? Like he can go there and struggle while hitting the ball hard, which we kind of saw from Arjun through the second half of last year. One thing with Arjun, I did want to point out, like this year, again, there where he's played 12 games in 2026, so it's like the tiniest of sample sizes, but his road OPS this year is 933 and his home OPS is 556.
I mean, if you want to lay it on a platter for why Nat Bailey is,
I honestly I wouldn't even point it out because it's so early in the season. But last year, obviously a full season there, and his road OPS was 827 and his home OPS was 558.
I mean, listen, like clearly, this is a guy that is fighting for his life when he's in Vancouver.
Yeah, it'll be yeah, it's it's a tough spot. So I wonder kind of if the best course of action for JoJo is just let him take off in Dunedin, maybe give him like a short stint in Vancouver to end the year, but like really give him the bulk of his time in Dunedin where he can continue to work kind of with, near the player development complex and just really kind of rake in the Florida State
I
League.
mean, it would make sense, right? The other prospect also, because we're talking about Vancouver, Johnny King had a nice
Yeah,
start his last time out,
yeah.
and we didn't mention him as another guy that went through Dunedin last year, obviously,
It's
but he's off to a nice start too in
there's
Vancouver.
there's so many guys that are off to like good starts. Even today, the minor leagues of course do their players of the week every week, and we saw four Blue Jays prospects. It was Sean Keys, Tucker Toman, Daniel Guerra, and Nolan Perry. All four of them receiving the Player or Pitchers of the Week awards at their respective levels. So, just an incredible start. Sean Keys was another guy that I did want to talk about. We kind of knew that there was kind of a breakout coming for him, given the way that he performed last year and ran such a low BABIP, and had really nice underlying data. And now this year, in Double A, of course, playing at at the park there in Manchester is certainly advantageous to left-handed hitters. But he has a 206 WRC plus through the first 12 games of the season, 5 homers, a 482 OBP. Like he is just smashing the ball there. And the whole team in New Hampshire, really, I think you look at Eddie Micheletti Jr., Jackson Hornung, like all these guys have OPSs that are like 900 and above.
Yeah, everybody's raking. It's been a great start for these Blue Jays. Listen, last year was such a success on the pitching side. If the bats can kind of become a story this year, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, it would be like really nice. Obviously, you kind of look at the team in Buffalo, right? And you have guys there, Shrek, Pinango, McAdoo, who are all kind of these positive stories, but as soon as you start to get like the Keyeses and the Michelettis and kind of all these other guys that are going to kind of make their way to that level, like there's going to be like a large number of guys who are kind of knocking on the door and kind of ready to taste the big leagues sooner rather than later, which will be very good for them because if you look at future free agent classes, there is not a lot of hitters that are going to be available. So,
It's going to be
as you
crucial for
lose
them.
like the George Springers, even if you want to put some of the pitchers into that group,
The Dalton
there's
Varshows, if you
Dalton
want to put him in
Varsho's,
that discussion.
there's some reinforcements kind of seemingly on the way. So,
It's encouraging. It's a big year for the Jays farm system, and the start has been tremendously encouraging.
yeah, 100%. We'll keep following, but anything else from you on the Blue Jays, on the minor leagues, on this series in LA, as we kind of wrap up here today?
I think it's just that they've got to get the ship righted. And, step one was pick up some runs in, the series finale against the D-backs. Now you got to carry that over into Los Angeles.
Yeah, it'll be a big series. Dylan Cease on the mound is always a treat to watch, especially the way that he's thrown the ball this year. So, hopefully, as you say, time to right the ship. So, that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow all of us on X. I'm at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the games this week.